Shall we start? Good morning, Philippines. Welcome and good day, everyone. Fresh morning from Sydney, Australia. My name is Jerome Babate. I am the host and moderator of today's webinar organized by the Sydney-based PropDev Center, which is a professional development organization. A month ago, we've started the National Education Webinar Series, and this webinar series is designed to help education professionals learn how to turn evidence into practice in schools and how to use evidence to measure the impact of their teaching and leadership. Before we start the event, let us all put ourselves in the mighty presence of God and say our prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this webinar. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, as we make decisions that might affect our students, teachers, communities, and our society. And continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish is the pursuit of truth for the greater glory of you and for the service of humanity. We ask these things in your name. Amen. This event is being recorded for those who are unable to participate today and will be available on YouTube later. At the end of the presentation, our presenter will answer your questions, which you can type in the chat box that you and we will address as many questions as time allows. After filling up the online evaluation form, a certificate of participation will be emailed to you along with the link of the recording of this webinar. Now, a little bit about our presenter, Dr. Emilson Vibar. Dr. Vibar is an alumnus of Polytechnic University of the Philippines in Santa Mesa, Manila, for his doctorate degree in educational management. Dr. Vibar is both a nurse and a licensed professional teacher whose research interests include health sciences research, educational policy research, and management and governance studies, where his study falls into. Presently, Dr. Vibar is affiliated with the University of Santo Tomas, Manila, as a faculty member under the Health Allied strand of senior high school, where he also serves as an area lead for Introduction to Healthcare since 2017. He teaches specialized and applied courses such as the Introduction to Healthcare, Research 3, and Work Immersion, and is a member of various committees, including Scholarship Committee, Permanent Committee on Library, the Student Welfare and Development Committee, and is also a member of the Ad Hoc Committee for Faculty Evaluation. Apart from his teaching stint in university, he's also being invited as a resource speaker in in-service trainings to discuss behavioral management, design thinking, and experiential learning around Metro Manila area. Furthermore, he also participates in various research conferences as a member of the board of reviewer, adjudicator, panel reactor, and panel paper presenter. Moreover, Dr. Vibar actively engages to different professional organizations such as the Philippine Nurses Association, the Asia Pacific Consortium of Researchers and Educators, Leadership in Education Academy and Development, International Association of Scholarly Publishers, Editors, and Reviewers, the Philippine Educational Measurement and Evaluation Association, and finally, the Asian Association of Interdisciplinary Research, among others. Okay, so without much further ado, let me welcome Dr. Emilson Vibar.
Now, to start with my study, I am very delighted to share with you the study titled Tier 4 Higher Education Institutions Perspectives. Now, to begin with, let me cite the statement of the Director of International Affairs of the Commission on Higher Education here in the Philippines, Attorney Lily Freydam Pacabangon Milia, during the Higher Education Thought Leaders Conference about internationalization of Philippine higher education held in Lawag City, Ilocos Norte, when she emphasized that internationalization is not about the number of agreements concluded, number of programs and courses taught in English, number of students and foreign travels, and internationalization, okay, in its very essence is and liberating mindset that infuses the international multicultural dimension into the purpose, functions, and delivery of post-secondary and continuing education, while reinforcing the values, interests, and goals of the institution, national development, and ASEAN community building. Indeed, internationalization is the future of education. Higher education institutions in the Philippines face a tremendous challenge in terms of internationalization. This challenge appears as a new economy in the field of education, and it moves at an accelerating pace. It prompts education leaders to make it as a priority agenda in order for students and teachers to be kept at pace with the world. Higher education institutions are now being encouraged to internationalize, according to Bernardo. The education sector is one of the areas influenced mainly by internationalization. Apart from economy and business cooperation, free trade market, and multilateral diplomatic relationship. Consequently, internationalization has brought about considerable impacts on education, which significantly contributed to perceivable changes in human life and various fields and disciplines. The prospects of internationalization in Philippine higher education were contextualized within the present educational system, which experiences diverse problems as to efficiency, quality, equity, and access, and other external factors. Numerous issues and consequences were identified related to internationalization. The financial resources limit international student and staff mobility from the Philippines to other countries. Only institutions and with large financial endowments could enjoy the said purpose, and students from high income families. Philippine higher education institutions with internationally and regionally competitive programs will primarily benefit from becoming destinations of student and staff mobility. Hence, the need to develop a well-defined niche in the higher education market based on the areas of strength of the institution. Appropriate faculty training, adequacy of libraries and research facilities, among others, are necessary to be able to develop effective and efficient international programs. Elite higher education institutions are very likely to develop international research collaborations because of their resources, making them attractive partners for collaborations. Thus, a more effective means of establishing research infrastructure and capabilities in Philippine universities. Moreover, participation in the international quality assurance system is likely to happen among elite higher education institutions, as the resources required are mostly unavailable for most low-end and middle-level higher education institutions. A study also revealed that international programs may intensify the existing weaknesses of the Philippine higher education, such as no improvement in the quality of most higher education institutions, lower external efficiency as institutions address global requirements, and more inequitable access to quality higher education. However, middle level higher education institutions may benefit from internal education by benchmarking quality standards, mainly if appropriate government agencies support it. Hence, these issues and gaps compelled or prompted me to conduct this study. The systems theory developed by Bertal and Fanny's general systems theory defines universities and colleges as a management system. So the general systems theory developed by Bertal and Panis was the main theoretical framework used in this study, as well as the CMO 55 or CHED Memorandum Order 55 series of 2016, the policy framework in Philippine higher education for internationalization. According to the general systems theory by Bertal and Fannis, management system, universities and colleges is considered as a flagrantly open system in that energy input and output conversion into additional energy input consists of interactions between the entity and its environment. There are some advantages of implementing system theory to the internationalization of higher education institutions. First, system theory describes the program's multiple subsections. Secondly, system theory views higher education institutions as a dynamic system wherein development happens because of relationship between or with the external world and the subparts of the system, such as between subparts itself. Third, because the internationalization of higher education institutions involves a global, cross-cultural element in the organization's teaching and learning, analysis and supporting services, reform needs to take place at the various levels to make it successful. Now, in the present study, I made use of four demographic variables and eight interrelated domains or indicators of internationalization. The demographic variables were mainly information about the higher education institution, which includes the length of establishment, level of institutional accreditation, organizational infrastructure, and budget appropriation. These variables were explored and determined if they were significantly associated with the holistic indicators of internationalization. When I speak of holistic indicators of internationalization, I'm talking of the eight domains or indicators, such as first, articulated institutional commitment. Second, mobility for teaching and learning, which is classified into several subsystems or subdomains such as student mobility, faculty and staff mobility, curriculum or program mobility, as well as support students. Third, research collaboration. Fourth, institutional networks or collaborations and partnerships. Fifth, social engagement. Sixth, governance and leadership. Seventh, external funding. And lastly, institutional investment to faculty. Any change in the variables, as I have mentioned, would consequently result to an alteration or change in the internationalization practices of these higher education institutions. Primarily, the study purported to describe the tier 4 higher education institutions. When we speak of tier 4 higher education institutions, these are institutions of higher learning with internationalization vision but with limited academic cooperation agreements. Second, the study purported to explore their internationalization practices using the eight domains or holistic indicators of internationalization and determine the extent of their internationalization. And lastly, to determine the significant difference in the internationalization practices of these HEIs with respect to their demographic characteristics. Now, using a quantitative descriptive evaluative design, a content validated, reliability tested, IRB approved survey questionnaire was developed to gather essential data. 180 administrator respondents representing the tier 4 higher education institutions, including private higher education institutions, local universities and colleges, state universities and colleges satellite campuses, and special higher education institutions. Stratified random sampling technique was used as the main sampling technique. As I said, these tier 4 higher education institutions have internationalization vision, but they have limited academic cooperation agreements. A list of tier 4 higher education institutions was provided by the Commission on Higher Education International Affairs Staff Office. The study was participated by a total of 180 administrator respondents representing the higher education institutions in the entire National Capital Region. Based on the list, majority of the participants were private higher education institutions, which make up 93.89% or 169 of the total population. They were private higher education institutions, and 6% or 11 were non-private, which include the local universities and colleges, SUC satellite campuses, and special higher education institutions. A survey questionnaire was developed and contextualized based on the holistic indicators of internationalization. This was came from Asia Pacific Education Policy Brief and Comprehensive Internationalization Indicators from the American Council on Education and Comprehensive Internationalization for Global Engagement or SEAGE. It underwent rigorous content validation, okay, although it was adopted. Okay, and it also underwent pilot study, reliability testing through Cronbach's Alpha with a reliability coefficient of 0.82 and was thoroughly reviewed and successfully approved by the University Research Ethics Committee. Statistical measures used to analyze the gathered data were percentage, weighted mean, chi-square, and Fisher's exact test of independence. I used the Fisher's exact test of independence for the categorical variables to determine whether the proportions of one variable are different depending on the value of the other variable, given the sample size is small, which is 180. Now let us proceed to the meat of the study, the results and discussion. First objective is to describe the higher education institutions according to the length of establishment. In terms of the length of establishment, okay, the length of establishment of participating higher education institutions varies. Out of 180 respondents, 12 or 6.67% were the oldest institution, built around 101 years and above, while most of the HEIs, or 42 or 23.33%, were established in 11 to 20 years. Moreover, the youngest higher education institutions, built for around 1 to 10 years, consisted of 12 or 6.67% of the total population. Now, in terms of level of institutional accreditation, okay, based on ISA or Institutional Sustainability Assessment, okay, there are a majority of the institutions were categorized as level 2. Out of 180, 100 or 55.56% were occupying the level 2. Accreditation fosters excellence in higher education institutions. It assures the educational community, the public, and their agencies that the institution has clearly and appropriately defined its objectives. Results show that HEIs who participated in this study were from level 1 to level 4. It is part of the marketing strategy to get global accreditations from credible accrediting and certifying bodies to fully acknowledge the strength of the local institution of higher learning. According to Hans DeWitt, a famous uh, author, okay, and a researcher, okay, conducted studies about internationalization. He observed that global certification based on processes for organizational or institutional quality management has shown to be an active strategy for developing quality and performance. Third is organizational infrastructure. When I talk about organizational infrastructure, it refers to the presence and or existence of a highly functional international relations office or IRO, chaired by a senior or internationalization officer of the university. This office is basically responsible for the planning, development, implementation, and monitoring of international activities and programs of the institution. Now, the study revealed that most of the higher education institutions, or 103, had international relations office. However, 77 or 42.78% revealed that they still do not have IRO in their university. This is supported by the study of Sangalang in the year 2016, which stated that every university must have an office to manage the existing planning and projects relating to internationalization for the sustainable practices of the university's competence and efficiency or effectiveness. Lastly, in terms of budget allocation for internationalization, okay, the majority of the respondents, or 103, or 57.22% allocates budget for international programs and activities. However, 77 or 42.78% do not. Looking into the approximate budget for internationalization, I also do ask the respondents as regards their budget for internationalization. 7 or 3.89% of the HEIs allocate around 200 to 500,000 pesos for internationalization. Moreover, 92 or 51.11% allocates 100 to 200,000 pesos. Okay? While 1 or 0.56% allocates less than 100,000 pesos for their international programs and activities. Okay? Also, there are 77 or 42.78% of the higher education institutions still have no budget for internationalization. And 3 or 1.67% did not answer this portion of my study. This was supported by Malyari in 2019, who stated that Philippine universities and colleges face inadequate internationalization budget. Some allocation modifications were made by most of the universities to improve flexibility and the effectiveness of certain programs. Yet, the budget still seems to be insufficient to fulfill most of the institution's difficulties. Now, in terms of the internationalization practices, okay, based on this table, social engagement obtained the highest mean, which is 3.98. When I speak of social engagement, this domain is made up of indicators to measure the extent of internationalization in the third mission of the university, which is community outreach or extension, or community engagement of the university at large. This is followed by institutional investment to faculty with a grand mean of 3.80. Okay? When I speak of institutional investment to faculty, this represents the career growth opportunities currently offered to the faculty to encourage them to enhance their international knowledge and expertise. Third is articulated institutional commitment, which has a mean of 3.77. This category exhibits the extent by which the organization has published or developed policies to promote internationalization. It was measured by looking into the vision and mission, development plan, systematic evaluation, management, and criteria for student exchange and faculty advancement of the organization. Okay? And lastly, okay, to determine the significant difference in internationalization practices of the Tier 4 higher education institutions with respect to their demographic characteristics. Okay, so here I use chi-square and Fisher's exact test of independence, and the results are as follows. So this is based on the premise that if p-value is greater than the 0.05, then the result is not significant. Therefore, association is not evident between the variables. And if v value is less than 0.05, the result is significant. Okay? Association is evident between variables. Now, in terms of the length of establishment, the test revealed that no evidence, okay, that the current practices on internationalization significantly differ based on the number of years since the institution was established. For the level of institutional accreditation based on institutional sustainability assessment, the test clearly shows that the current practices have a significant difference with the level of institutional accreditation based on the chi-square test result and Fisher's exact test value. Results indicate evidence that the current practices significantly differ with the HEI level of accreditation. Internationalization, okay, is one of the most significant factors in quality reviews. That's according to Gasparian and Topkian, okay, in 2015. And they mentioned that the function of the quality assurance in improving internationalization is becoming more important when it comes to evaluating, ensuring, and improving the level of internationalization element in accordance with the specified aims and goals of the tertiary level institutions, both domestic and global criteria. External Quality Assurance System primarily said the system of accreditation is an important tool for improving the standard of internationalization in tertiary level institutions. Meanwhile, for the organizational infrastructure, okay, or the presence of International Relations Office, okay, looking at the chi-square test result and Fisher's exact test value, the test indicates evidence that the current practices on internationalization significantly differ with the HEI organizational infrastructure. This is also affirmed by the study of Sanggalang Rosana in 2016, who stated that every HEI must have an office to manage the existing planning and projects relating to internationalization for the sustainability of the university's competence and effectiveness. In addition, okay, Section 9 of Article 4 of CHED Memorandum Order 55, Series of 2016, dictates as well that the CHED shall determine basic conditions for Philippine higher education institutions to effectively implement internationalization programs. HEIs need to prove that they can implement internationalization programs and to uphold and promote the Philippines' reputation for providing quality higher education through the following. First, okay, the institution must have an internationalization strategic plan. Second, the physical, financial, and human resources, which include budget allocation, facilities and equipment, including a dedicated international relations office and an international student center. And lastly, the administrative infrastructure. So the institution must have a quality assurance system, okay, in order to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness and efficiency of the programs and activities being offered, according to CMO 55 series of 2016. And lastly, with respect to budget allocation for internationalization as presented, okay, it was found out that the current practices have a significant difference with the budget allocation. This is further validated by Section 9 of CMO 55, which explicitly states that financial resources, okay, or budget and funding allocation is one of the conditions, okay, for HEIs to successfully implement internationalization programs. Apart from this policy, the need for funding support for international programs in higher education is well justified in the survey conducted by the International University Association or IAU in 2014, which needs a systematic approach to internationalization at all higher education institutions. The integration as an operational goal of an internationalization plan will originate together with the resources to execute it. Most significantly, HEIs should devote the required financial resources or funding and perform the required analysis and assessment in order to provide in place a strategic approach to internationalization. Now, with all of these findings, in light of the findings drawn, the following conclusions were deduced. Tier 4 higher education institutions have the right ingredients or characteristics that promote and advance internationalization of higher education. Tier 4 higher education institutions have growing interest, okay, commitment and importance for internationalization. And the level of institutional accreditation, organizational infrastructure, and budget allocation are significant variables, okay, in order to ensure successful implementation of internationalization among these Tier 4 higher education institutions. Now, for the limitations and the recommendations, okay, for further research, The instrument or the questionnaire that I use could actually be used by administrators from other regions to assess the extent of internationalization of their respective institution. The study also provides windows of opportunities to researchers and administrators. Okay? Perhaps they may conduct studies about the following. First, funding source and strategies of Philippine HEIs for internationalization programs. Second, quality assurance mechanisms and organizational structure as correlates to our internationalization of Philippine HEIs. They may also explore, okay, benefits and opportunities of internationalization as perceived by the stakeholders, such as students, faculty, academic, and administrative officials. Fifth, faculty and students' attitudes and extent of involvement or participation in the internationalization of Philippine AGIs. And lastly, a qualitative phenomenological study on the internationalization practices of these Tier 4 higher education institutions could also be dealt. Now, as an impact or outcome of this study, okay, the findings could bring about positive change in the higher education landscape, okay, particularly to the local universities and colleges, the special higher education institutions, the SUC satellite campuses, and the private HEIs from other regions that are about to engage or pursue in internationalization. Okay, so basically the findings are deemed beneficial for these sector, the LUCs, the special HEIs, SUC satellite campuses, and private HEIs, especially from other regions. Okay, the study may also give them a bird's eye view of the internationalization practices being done by the HEIs in NCR. In the long run, these HEIs would be able to experience the fruits or benefits of internationalization among its stakeholders, such as employees, both the academic and non-academic personnel, administration, and even the students. Next is the Commission on Higher Education. Okay, they may also benefit from the study as it provides them information about how the middle and low level or developing HEIs promote and undertake internationalization programs and activities. As part of their mandated functions, they may review or revisit the CMO 55 series of 2016 or the policy framework for the internationalization of Philippine higher education, highlighting on the CHED areas of support. Okay? The need to modify it based on the results of the study, providing the support not only to those HEIs under the category of tiers 1 to 3, okay, but also to tier 4 higher education institutions that are trying to engage in internationalization. And as a long-term outcome of this study, if all HEIs would undertake internationalization, these would enable them to contribute to the enhancement of the quality of higher education. HEIs would be able to strengthen the country's role in an interconnected global community. They will be able to develop their own institution as productive members of the international academic community, produce graduates with 21st century competencies able to live and work in a diverse multicultural setting, and these would enable them to create closer cooperation and understanding between the Philippines and the rest of the world. Now, these are the references or the bibliographic entries that I used for my literature review to justify, validate, and support the findings. Thank you once again, and good day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bibar, for such an insightful presentation. Um, yeah, very interesting one. We just like to recognize here the presence of Dr. Gaudi Ortiz. So Dr. Gaudi is the research director of Notre Dame of the Jangas University in Mindanao. Good afternoon, Dr. Gaudi. Yes, we got
Hello, Doc. I
I
think you're
just
in mute.
yes, I just received an email from two. I think, participants. But before that, I'd just like to highlight your, you know, very interesting point that you have raised about an issue on mobility, student mobility. I understand that among countries in Southeast Asia, Philippines is not attracting international students. I mean, to study in the Philippines. Well, save for other schools. I can name one university in the north which had attracted a number of subcontinent students. I mean, talking of India, Pakistan, to study in the in its medical school. And there's another one in Davao, which is also attracting the same number of, yes, same number of people from this region. Why is it that our CHED, or mainly our higher education institutions, are not so aggressive in promoting our products and services as a university?
All right, sir. All right. Um, First of all, these tier 4 higher education institutions that are involved in my study have actually limited funding, limited budget for the internationalization. So they also have these problems or challenges when it comes to budget, which is, of course, one of the conditions, one of the basic conditions required in order for them to successfully implement internationalization. So they would uh, find it difficult to create what we call this movement of services, the flow of even the information technology. Okay, so movement of ideas. Okay, so that's the main problem why these tier 4 higher education institutions encounter this difficulty in rendering services to other countries. That's why they are mainly categorized as tier 4 higher education institutions.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Emerson. Here's a question from, I think this relates to my earlier question from Ray of Cebu. How Filipino demographics and technology are reshaping our Philippine university? Can we compete with our Southeast Asian university neighbors?
Given the present circumstance, since we are now on serious disruption because of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course because of we are struggling through this global disruption of lives, jobs, education, even health, safety, and economies. Okay, there is this powerful influence of internationalization and globalization. And so, uh, if I am going to predict or foresee post COVID-19, there is this what we call now the blended mobility. Okay, we can no longer we can no longer go back to to what we call the normal. Okay, we can no longer go back to normal after all. So globalization and higher education internationalization perhaps will not go away, but these should actually be accelerated by every institutions of higher learning. Okay, although there are pre-existing challenges already, such as for the tier 4 higher education institutions in terms of budget or funding. Okay, because of these travel restrictions. Okay, there will definitely problem when it comes to student and even faculty and staff mobility. Okay, but we can still do what we call the blended mobility. Okay. When you speak of blended mobility, we can actually strengthen what we call one of the pillars of internationalization, which is home-based or internationalization at home or campus-based internationalization, which would require the use of information technology. That's why we can still have these we can still promote internationalization, but to a limited extent. Okay, but to a limited extent post COVID-19. Okay, now with regard to the student and faculty mobility, okay, uh, there might be a difficulty on that because of the travel restrictions. Okay, but a revision. Okay, I think there should be a revision on the goals and strategies of institutions of higher learning post COVID-19. Okay, there should also be innovation in practice, as well as still integration of higher education internationalization into its core institutional missions. Okay, what else? Into its research function. Okay, what else? International educators must also, I believe, they should also plan and work towards new realities in the interest of local and global common goods. Okay, so that that would be all, Doc.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Dr. Emerson. Yes, I there's one interesting point that, like a question that I was raised by Ray here, that can we really compete with our Southeast Asian university neighbors? And I think you did not mention about this.
Uh, Even higher education institutions abroad, as of this present circumstance, might also experience difficulty in competing with other higher education institutions around the world. But of course, because they have already developed or they have already built an excellent niche when it comes to internationalization. Okay, if we are going to compare Philippines, okay, the institutions of learning in the Philippines, we might we would really encounter a lot of challenges in competing with other nations or countries. But
Yeah,
still, we can promote internationalization by fostering internationalization at home or campus-based internationalization with the use of information technology. Ayan.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That could be an interesting idea, Dr. Vivar, because I noticed that during this COVID time, they were also like initiating some universities that I've observing lately, they're initiating virtual faculty exchange. So there's no physical movement, but there's a virtual collaboration that is happening not only with faculty members but also students. So
yes,
this,
Doc.
in essence, that help increases internationalization, you know,
Y-
efforts.
Yes, Doc.
Mm.
Actually, Doc, we might we would really encounter a problem when it comes to cross-border internationalization. Okay, but when it comes to home-based or campus-based internationalization, we can still strengthen that, and perhaps we can also build a niche on that. Pag sinabi pong home-based or campus-based internationalization, it actually refers to collaborative activities with foreign higher education institutions, just like what you have mentioned, Doc. Okay, and fostering linkages with these international institutions. Okay, of course, this would be propelled by information technology, but the learners here or the students would no longer be moving out of their national territories. They don't need to travel to another countries in order to learn something. So nandun din papasok yung tinatawag natin na exchange of knowledge. Okay? Exchange of knowledge and ideas. Okay? Or what we call knowledge mobility. Okay? Perhaps activities under home-based internationalization may include let's say in curriculum and programs, okay, provision of international content and dimension in the curriculum. Okay, we can still do that. Okay, learning and teaching programs as well as learning materials which contain which integrates or infuses multicultural and international content. Okay, when it comes to teaching and learning process, Okay, involvement of returned study abroad students. Okay, perhaps in some institutions there were students who came back to the Philippines because of the COVID-19, and the same with other countries. Okay, they also encounter the same problem. Okay, so the involvement of these returned study abroad students could be facilitated as well. Use of international scholars and faculty members. Okay, integration of international and intercultural materials, and virtual student mobility. Okay, so we also have distance learning. Okay, we also have establishment of student clubs and organizations linked with those in other countries, holding of intercultural campus events, as well as establishing connections with cultural and ethnic groups. So those are just a few examples of how we can maximize, or
That's true.
how we can strengthen campus-based or home-based internationalization.
That's really good. Yeah, you offer a lot of innovative ideas there, and I think we hope that these universities would, would pick them up, because these are low cost alternatives that you can make use of. There's a question here from James, and I think this is just a reiteration of your previous insights. How is globalization, which is the transfer of people, goods, and services, is having a major impact on Philippine higher education institution, or I would say sector?
uh, there is a debate where if globalization, internationalization are similar. Okay. Um, there is this study that I came across, and it says there that internationalization is a a part and parcel of globalization. So therefore, uh, globalization plays a paramount role in furthering the internationalization of every institutions, of higher education institutions. So by simply strengthening or enhancing the programs and activities of the institutions, okay, this would still promote, okay, this would still promote the movement of or smooth flow of ideas, okay, knowledge between and among countries. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Bibar. Here's an interesting trend that is happening actually in the Philippines. When I moved here 6 years ago in Australia, I've noticed that our local legislators keep on creating new universities. So at the moment we have more or less like 60, 70 state universities in the Philippines. Uh, what is the impact of this in terms of our competitiveness in the international, in the internationalization efforts?
Actually, Doc, if these putting up of more state universities would actually enhance one of the objectives of Philippine higher education, which is accessibility of higher education. So that's the main reason why legislators keep on putting up these institutions of higher learning from or in various regions, in order to provide access to quality. But the problem there is the quality. Sorry, the problem there is the quality of the higher education. So since these institutions are kumbaga bago pa lang itong institutions na ito, they still need to develop uh, excellence in what particular program. Okay, they still need to, in other words, they still need to prove themselves on which program they will of course, the programs or curriculum offerings that they will put up should also be relevant and responsive to the local needs and demands of the area or the region in which they were put up.
Yeah. In fact, there's one, I would say, a genius, educational policy genius, that said that we might as well merge these state colleges and universities and come up with, like, say 16, the most that we can have in the Philippines is 16 universities, like regional universities, and then put all resources there, and then these 16 universities will compete with one another, and then not only among themselves but only competing with other universities outside of the country as well.
You were talking, Doc, about amalgamation,
Amalgamation,
amalgamation, yes,
that's the
amalgamation
right
of
term. Yeah, thank you.
higher education institutions.
Yes.
However, it also poses threats to some higher education institutions, such as, of course, they will be under this particular university. Let's say one university in Bicol was actually about to be amalgamated with the University of the Philippines, but they did not agree to have to be amalgamated, to be under the University of the Philippines system, because of course, there will be issue when it comes to budget. Okay, of course, they will also be the administrators, the officials would also be under the UP system. So there are disadvantages, of course, disadvantages to this amalgamation of institutions. But it also provides benefits when it comes to, of course, these institutions would, um, the programs that they would offer are subjected to quality assurance. So what I'm saying is, these programs are the institutions are making sure that the programs being offered by these institutions are, of course, of quality. Okay, so there is this quality and excellence, okay, when it comes to the programs being offered. Okay, there is also the relevance and responsiveness, effectiveness and efficiency, and of course access and equity of these programs to the local.
That's interesting point, because that leads me to another question, which is, well, where from the place where I came from in General Santos City, University of Santo Tomas has opened last year. It opened up its new Mindanao campus. It's an 80 hectares campus. So I don't know the minds of the Dominicans, but hey, they are looking internationalization, with Indonesia being the just a neighbor of Davao. Okay, so they could be that could be a target for them. I don't know, but you have your insights on this?
Actually, I learned about that also, Doc, because they also put up a campus in the south area in, I think, Laguna. They also put up a Laguna campus, but still hindi pa siya ano, it's not yet fully operational. But I don't know the main reason of the Dominicans regarding the putting up of perhaps
Yeah.
accessibility of their programs to other regions, not only in the NCR or in Metro Manila. Okay. Considering
Yeah.
that in Metro Manila we already have a lot of colleges and universities, so there are
Correct.
a
Yeah.
lot of competitors. So if you're going to put up another campus in an area or in another region where we can still offer quality and excellent programs, okay, so that would be advantageous to the people, to the needs and demands of the community in that particular region.
Yes. Thank you very much for that one. I think we have virtually covered very important aspects about higher education here. I mean, most pressing issues on higher education in the Philippines. So, would you like to have a parting words for this webinar, Dr. Emerson, before we wind up?
um, for the institutions of higher learning, for the for the colleges and universities who are or who will about to pursue or engage in internationalization, okay, I encourage you to inch by inch, okay, pursue internationalization by starting at the basic, the basic level, which is the vision, mission, goals, and the philosophy of the institution. Okay, the internationalization should actually be explicitly expressed or reflected on the vision and mission of the institution. If the institutional vision, mission, goals, and objectives are are into internationalization, okay, then the strategies, the thrusts, and the initiatives, or even the programs, the projects of the institution, okay, would also be aligned with internationalization. So doon magsisimula yung proseso ng internationalization. That's why uh, in my study, okay, one of the important indicators, one of the holistic indicators of internationalization is articulated institutional commitment.
Mhm.
And articulated institutional commitment means that dun pa lang, okay, sa vision, mission, aims, and objectives of the institution, nandun na yung internationalization. Okay? Yeah.
Thank you very much for that insight, Dr. Vibar. So, yeah, before we wind up our webinar today, just like a reminder to our participants, there's only one participant that we have, but this will be our recording will be made available on YouTube, and then we'll send an invitation to fill up the evaluation form so you can receive your e-certificate.